What if the great judge Deborah wasn't just a wise leader of Israel, but a master of spiritual forces, able to manipulate the very winds of heaven to secure victory? What if the success of Israel's military campaigns, her divine inspiration, and her unparalleled wisdom were not just gifts from God, but the result of a deeper, mysterious power, one that she wielded with intent and mastery? Deborah's story in the book of Judges is a familiar one, a prophetess, a judge, a mother in Israel. She is depicted as a righteous woman whose wisdom and divine insight led Israel to victory over the oppressive Canaanite forces. But what if there is more to her story? What if her victories were not merely the result of divine intervention, but of her own understanding of a hidden spiritual science, the art of controlling the sacred winds, or what some might call divine breath? In Judges 4, Deborah summons Barak, the military leader of Israel, and tells him that God has commanded him to take 10,000 men and defeat the mighty army of Sisera, the general of Canaan. But when Barak hesitates, it is Deborah who offers to lead the charge. She does not fear the powerful forces that threaten Israel. Instead, she speaks with a kind of authority that seems to transcend human understanding. But what if this authority was not just the product of divine inspiration? What if Deborah knew how to harness and manipulate the spiritual air, the ethereal forces of the heavens themselves? In ancient traditions, the concept of manipulating spiritual or divine winds is not new. From the breath of life in Genesis to the idea of Ruach, the Hebrew word for spirit or wind, there is a deep connection between wind and spirit in the Bible. The same Ruach that God used to breathe life into Adam might have been the very force Deborah commanded in her time of need. It is said in Genesis 1:2 that the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters, and in Ezekiel 37:9, the prophet calls on the wind to bring life to the dry bones. This wind is not just air, it is the very breath of God, the essence of divine power that shapes creation. Deborah's control over the spiritual elements may not be as far-fetched as it sounds. Her story is set against the backdrop of a people at war, yet, despite the overwhelming odds, she inspires victory. Is it possible that she understood how to summon the divine winds, turning them against her enemies? The text in Judges 4:15 is curious. The Lord routed Sisera and all his chariots and army by the sword. But what if this routing was not simply the result of a military strategy or divine will? What if Deborah, through her deep spiritual connection and understanding, called upon the very winds of heaven to scatter the enemy forces, leaving them vulnerable to attack? In the ancient world, the winds were often seen as manifestations of divine forces. In ancient Egypt, for example, the winds were associated with gods who controlled fate. In the Bible, we see time and again that God uses natural forces to bring about his will. From the parting of the Red Sea to the calm over the storm, these acts are not mere coincidences, they are manifestations of divine power over nature. Deborah, as a prophetess and judge, may have tapped into this hidden knowledge, using her unique position as a spiritual leader to influence these forces in favor of Israel. Her connection to the divine, her unshakable confidence, could very well have been the result of her deep understanding of these energies. In many cultures, women were revered as keepers of the mysteries, able to commune with spiritual forces in ways that men could not. Deborah, as a woman in a male-dominated society, was not only a judge, but also a bridge between the earthly and the divine. Her role as a prophetess was not just to speak for God, but to understand the mechanics of the divine and how it could be wielded. What if Deborah's ability to call on these divine winds also explains the miraculous events of her time? The victory over Sisera's army, which seemed so unlikely, might have been more than just a strategic military win. It could have been a result of Deborah's ability to control the invisible forces of the world around her. The winds, which represent both the spirit and the breath of God, could have been her tool, guiding her to victory in ways the human mind cannot fathom. Imagine the scene. Deborah, standing tall in her role as both judge and spiritual leader, calls upon the forces of nature to aid her people. The air around her thickens with the power of the divine. The winds swirl, lightning cracks, and the heavens themselves seem to bend to her will. The enemy forces, who have boasted of their chariots and strength, are thrown into confusion. Their weapons are useless against the spiritual forces at play. They are defeated not by swords alone, but by the unseen breath of the divine. The connection between Deborah and the divine wind is not only symbolic, but practical. In her time, leaders and warriors often sought spiritual guidance before going into battle. Deborah's wisdom was not just rooted in human understanding, but in a deeper mystical knowledge of how the universe functioned. This knowledge, passed down through generations of spiritual leaders, gave her the ability to control not just the physical but the spiritual atmosphere. The wind, both physical and spiritual, was her ally in the battle for Israel's freedom. Deborah's story challenges us to reconsider our understanding of spiritual power. What if the victories we attribute to divine will are actually the result of a deeper, more complex understanding of the world around us? What if, like Deborah, we too have the ability to harness spiritual forces and influence the course of events in our lives? We are all shaped by the invisible forces that surround us, the energies that influence our thoughts, actions, and outcomes. Deborah's story invites us to think differently about these forces. Could it be that the power to shape our future is within our grasp, just as it was within Deborah's? Could it be that we too can learn to harness the spiritual winds that surround us, turning them in our favor? As we reflect on the life of Deborah, we are left with more questions than answers. Was her victory simply a result of her faith, or did she possess a deeper knowledge and ancient understanding of the divine winds? Could there be hidden mysteries in our world, waiting for us to discover them, just as Deborah did so long ago? Perhaps, just like her, we are being called to explore and harness the unseen forces that shape our world. Could it be that there is more to the story of Deborah than we've ever known? What if, hidden in the shadows of ancient history, there are secrets waiting to be uncovered? Stay tuned, because the story of Deborah may just be the key to unlocking a deeper understanding of the power that lies within us all.